Hey guys, it's Adam from Lucipixel and welcome back. Now, to give you a little bit of context on today's talk, a few weeks ago the artist Janet Chan from Honey and Absinthe, the Honey and Absinthe team being Janet Chan and Vincent Ramos, both Disney artists, she posted a video a couple of weeks back announcing the fact that she was leaving Disney and she wanted to pursue her own passions, so to speak. And which is great. And following that, they had posted a video together where Vincent and Janet, where particularly Janet, gets far more into detail and far more candid on the reasons why she left Disney. And a lot of her, what she expressed were her personal experiences working at Disney, and a lot of the negatives that came with her experiences there, and which were basically her incentive for leaving in the first place. And a lot of other artists online, such as Ethan Becker, for instance, that was the main one. He was the one who actually brought this whole thing to my attention, watching his video, had voiced in and their opinions and kind of their breakdowns on why they felt Janet might have gotten the response she did, because there was a bit of backlash. There was a bit of a bittersweet reaction to her video based on the way she kind of delivered that information. And Ethan in particular, in his own very entertaining way, posted a video kind of doing a real breakdown of a real technical breakdown of how she delivered that information. And in my opinion, listening to his video, really nailed it. I mean, his feedback, if you look past his performance, which is fun as hell to watch, he's funny as hell, but if you look past that, and just to analyze what he said objectively, it's compassionate, sound, professional, balanced advice. And there's no reason for me to repeat what he said. I think he pretty much nailed it. So I'm just going to direct you to him so you can go check out his video. I'll link it in the description below. The reason I'm coming in, the reason I felt compelled to voice in on this topic as well, is because, well, I'm kind of where Janet says she wants to go, in a sense. My last full-time job was working at Disney. I was a background supervisor for the TV show, for the Disney show Wander Over Yonder. And that was my last in-studio job until I started Lucipixel, my online art mentorship, and did some freelancing on the side for Fantasy Flight at the same time. And I've had several years in this. And Lucipixel, you might not know, you would if you followed my channel for any length, but Lucipixel was not my first business venture, so to speak. I had a little amateur one years ago, opening up a dance venue. And in both experiences, there were certain very fundamental things I learned about starting a business. And what I feel very often, at least in my experiences, lead to a successful business and things that you should know getting into it that sometimes people don't, and can inadvertently hamstring their careers, either financially or socially. So that's the kind of angle I want to come in here, because a lot of this reflects what Janet had shared on her channel as well, her experiences. And I hope this filters through the same crowd, that all of you who had listened to Ethan's video, had listened to Janet's video, or anybody else who talks about this, I want to offer this perspective on it, and one that I think you could really benefit from. So I want to come in from the business perspective of things, from somebody who's been in it for years. And I think the first important thing to mention here is, or at least a question to answer would be, are you well suited to be an independent artist? And if so, what kind of independent work would you be well suited for? And I would kind of put it into two different categories. One is starting a business, and the other is being a freelancer. Both of these things you can do independently, you can do from home. One of them requires you to develop something, some product, some platform. The other one would require you to just make yourself employable, making sure you have a portfolio, make sure your stuff is presentable, reaching out to different clients or studios, and potentially working freelance, as a lot of the artists I supervised on the Disney show did. A lot of them worked from home, and they worked full time doing that. So when it comes to the actual working freelance, really what you essentially need in that regard is skill, the ability to communicate in a somewhat professional way. Although I've dealt with artists, freelance artists, that were a little bit more a little bit more socially awkward, but it's no big deal because we're artists and some of us are very introverted. That's very, very common. So that's not a big deal. And their communication skills or lack thereof, so long as they were being polite about it, didn't impact their job. So long as they produced work and they did so meeting the company standard, it's all good. However, when it comes to a business, there's more of you involved in that process. And when it comes to a business, everything about you is a part of your business. It's not just the product. It's not just the service. All of you plays a part in it. There's promotion, there's communicating with other people, there's advertising your stuff online, there's building it technically, the actual logistics that go into building this particular business, which is always a supply and demand thing. It's never the same thing for everybody. Everybody kind of has their own technical gear, skill, experience requirements to do their particular job. But there's the social aspect of the job, which a lot of people take for granted. For instance, take Lucid Pixel, for instance, or take my original first business venture thing, which was starting a swing and jive dance club in Montreal West many years back. In both of those cases, I had to reach out to people. I had to let people know I existed. I had to go and find, like for the venue, I had to find DJs, and I had to find live bands, and I had to find lighting technicians, and I had to find sound technicians. I had to promote, I had to communicate with different schools to create these collaborations between different styles of dance and different schools of dance around the Montreal area. There was all of that kind of stuff. I had to speak to the people who ran the actual location where I wanted to host the venue. All of those things had to play a part in it. And if you're somebody who's more introverted, more quiet, this might not be a dynamic you like. If you listen to Janet and Vincent's podcast, the subsequent podcast that they did after her announcement, she talks about how she felt underutilized in a studio. She felt like a cog in a machine. Where Vincent immediately jumped in and said, I actually like that. I like being told what to do. I like being instructed. I like being guided. I like somebody giving me a kick in the ass because, well, for one of a million reasons. He doesn't necessarily specify why. He just says he likes it. But very often the reason is because, well, maybe you just don't have the energy to think up stuff. Maybe you just want somebody, you're more of an adaptable type of artist that fits in the studio setting. And if I have a whole talk where I talk about that, you can check it out right here if you click the link, where some people are well suited. They're very adaptable for studio settings and other people aren't. And this is something to take into account. It sounded to me like Vincent is a very adaptable artist. And to a certain degree, confided the fact that she had this job in the first place, so does Janet, although she felt unstimulated in that environment. As such, this is where she felt she had the incentive, that she had purpose to pursue her own private business, where Vincent didn't. He was perfectly content where he was. So do be aware of the fact that there's this social aspect that plays into it. Now, once you take that into account, the first key question that I get from students, from you guys who send me comments, or you send me private messages or emails and stuff like that. One of the key questions I get is being an independent artist a viable option? And I'm going to speak specifically to the business side of it, which is essentially what Janet is talking about. The business side of starting your own thing, starting your own artistic-based business, which, like I said, can be a multitude of different things. In my case, it's a school, right? But, well, from my personal experiences, from working in studios, many different studios, big jobs, small jobs, and everything in between, and running my own business, if you are well suited for that type of thing, if you are somebody who is a more outgoing, more connection-based type of person, I don't only find it a good option, in many cases, in my particular case especially, I find it a much better option. And I don't only mean better in terms of the stimulation and the inspiring side of the job, but I'm also talking about the stability side of the job. I always opted for the studio job. I always dismissed the idea of starting my own private business because I always thought it was something reserved for people with lots of money, lots of support, who had a large network, a big Rolodex, if you've ever heard of one of those things. Because to me, networking meant having a Rolodex back in the day. Remember, I'm in my 40s here. So it was like this big, expensive, complicated process. And from my experience, it is the complete opposite. In fact, I'd say since the internet didn't only revolutionize how we do our job, but it's revolutionized how we can run a business. And both in the case of starting and launching and advertising my dance venue, as it was for Lucid Pixel, I did so with the intent of spending little to no money whatsoever. I wanted to do everything myself, mostly because I was broke. There's no better catalyst for thriftiness, meaning being good with your money, getting more out of your money, than being broke, right? So for me, I was always in a place of financial desperation or insecurity, that if I was going to do anything like that, I had to do so in a very thrifty, very self-sufficient way. So when it came to Lucid Pixel, when it came to creating a website, creating the artwork for the website, bonus, we're artists, we can produce our own visuals. That usually costs a lot of money for other types of businesses. Running the business, creating the curriculum, uploading the curriculum, making sure that everything's secure, quality supervision, or rather quality control, all of those different types of things. I did it almost entirely for nothing. I wanted to build all of these things on my own, and I pretty much did in that regard. Not only that, but advertising. It's my very strong belief that spending a penny on advertising is a waste of money. Advertising is a way of making people think that if you give money to them, you'll get more money back. And especially when it comes to us artists or people who are already communicating with the public, don't put a penny into advertising. You don't need to. If you think about my only quote advertising for Lucid Pixel, for my mentorship, is these videos where I talk about it, where I mention it. I have a little link below in my description. That's it. I don't advertise it. I don't push it on anybody. I don't need to, because you already know who I am. You've heard of my students. I've mentioned it in my videos. I used to have my intro, which is kind of going through a transition period right now, but my intro would mention mentorship. But that's it. And only on one occasion did I actually test out the waters with Google Ads. I wanted to see if my videos could get any more traction, just out of pure curiosity. But I honestly felt like Google Ads feels like every other get rich quick kind of scheme. It's bullshit, right? And I remember putting $5 because I wanted to start modestly, and I put $5 on a video just to see if that video would do any better than the others. And I put in $5, and it says, oh, with $5 you can reach this many people, but if you put 10, you can reach that many. Okay, fine. 10. Oh, you're reaching 10, but if you put 20, you can reach that many people. And if you put 100, you could put, and you could see it's a money grab. It keeps telling you there's so much more potential with that little bit more money. And I capped it off at $20. I said, screw you guys, you're not getting a penny more than $20. And I put $20 in and everything like that, and I got nothing from it. Zero. Oh, but if you listen to the professionals, you need to put at least $100. You need to put at least 500, or you need to put at least 1,000 to really see the benefits from it. No, you don't. No, you don't. In fact, for me, the amount of money I spent on those Google ads had zero connection, zero relation to how well a video would do. The success or the failure of one of my videos on YouTube has everything to do with the subject itself, really. It has to do with the subject, and it has to do with what I'm contributing to that subject. That's pretty much it. Is it a popular topic, like what we're talking about today, or is it not a popular topic? And when I share certain topics with you guys, I'm doing so with the pre-knowledge that I'm expecting a lot of people to look at it, or I'm not expecting a lot of people to look at it. And to me, it's more about the importance of the message than the number of subs or clicks or views that I get from it, because I really honestly don't care how many clicks or views I get from it. It matters to me that I'm offering you guys something of value, period. But that's as much advertising, quote unquote, that I've ever done. I've never had to hire an advertising agency or anything like that. So do know that you can do so very cheaply. Now, what I mean by stability as well is, even when I worked for studios that were very stable, very popular, very big, where my reputation, where my relationships with my employers and with my colleagues was amazing, I very often got the plug pulled or the rug pulled out from under my feet without a moment's notice, where we'd show up for work and the boss would sit us down in the conference room and say, sorry guys, you've got 2 weeks left. And I went into this panic mode, and I was constantly in this. I found after going through that experience, sometimes due to my own faults because I wasn't good enough or not, or sometimes it was just shit happens. I was constantly in this paranoia mode where I always hoarded my money because I was always afraid I was going to need it. The joke was that it took me 8 years to buy a Cintiq. It did, because I would get a job, I'd almost have enough money, and then I'd lose my job and I'd have to spend it. And then I get another job and I'd almost have enough money, and then I'd lose my job. It was this roller coaster up and down. So that Cintiq sitting on my table has a big part of my history tied into it. That's why it's so precious to me. So when it comes to that, when it came to starting my own business, when it came to Lucid Pixel, and I really strongly believe this could have been the case with my dance venue, this is the longest term job I've ever had, where I have complete control over the fate of it depending on what I invest into it. And any successes or failures in this is something that I feel I have a lot more control over, versus what happened in the past was, yes, I'm getting that paycheck deposited every 2 weeks, and yes, I am getting certain types of insurance. But that plug could get pulled without a moment's notice, and I would be scrambling to find something to replace it. And it was a very stressful situation to find myself in, one which I have not found myself in for years. And I could actually, for the first time in my life, invest in my studio and invest in my space. And that's a very big deal to me. Something for you to definitely take into account. It's not a scary, dangerous, complicated world. It's actually quite self-doable in that regard. Now, the next thing is, and I think that this ties in a lot to what Janet had shared, and this is something that made me really want to voice in and offer some constructive feedback. Again, not deconstructing what she said. I'd rather you listen to Ethan's talk in that regard. He's covered it. But it's more in the starting a business side of things. And more often than not, I've seen many artists or entrepreneurs. There's always entrepreneurs out there looking for that business plan that's going to make them famous. And the ones that I've always found succeeded. And one of the reasons why I really strongly believe that both of my ideas actually gained traction and actually developed into something substantial is because I wasn't after money. I know it's a very romantic thing to say, but I actually wasn't after money. I was frustrated. And I think one of the best catalysts for innovation is frustration. We waste frustration as people in general. We'll whine and complain about things that we don't like. We'll bitch about it. And then we'll wait for somebody else to solve it. Or we'll just keep on bitching about it. And to that, I say, you are wasting an opportunity. If you're sitting, I'll give you an example, the dance venue I started that dance venue for two reasons. One, I wanted to bridge the gap between the jive and the swing dance communities, because they were two dance styles that I felt were very cross-compatible and I was very passionate about, but avoided each other. Swingers did not want to hang out with jivers and vice versa. And I was a part of a dance troupe with my friend Paul Macot that was more of a swing influenced version of jive that he kind of founded. He really designed that style himself, and I adopted it very passionately. And there was that, and there was also the frustration of the fact that every time I wanted to go out dancing, which was 3 to 4 times a week, I would have to travel downtown or across to Montreal East or to Montreal North or to Montreal South or to the West Island, and it was frustrating. It was a lot of travel and coming back home sweating at night. I wanted to just have something convenient and nearby, and there weren't any in the West End of Montreal. So I did. I made a venue in the West End of Montreal that invited 4 schools, 2 swing, 2 jive. So there was a diverse style of different jives and different swings. People that didn't get along finally had a platform to get along. They could promote their own businesses. They could share students between each other's schools, and it just worked. And it wasn't because I was a clever businessman. It was because I wasn't driven by business. I was driven by passion. I was driven by frustration. I really wanted to be a solution to a problem that I was dealing with, that I saw a lot of the other people dealing with as well. And because of that, it picked up. Now, it didn't succeed because I didn't put my heart into it. When people started complaining that the location was a bit hard to reach at certain times, I could have moved things around. I could have found something that was closer to the subway or metro, as they call it in Montreal. But it wasn't worth it because I never really planned ahead as a life career. It was a side thing for me. It was a venue. It wasn't I didn't want to dedicate the rest of my life to it because, well, I'm an artist. So when it came to Lucid Pixel, that was a very different story. For me, Lucid Pixel was a much more long-term commitment. And even though I didn't jump in, big piece of advice, don't jump in and burn your bridges. Test the waters. When I started Lucid Pixel, it was a serious idea. I invested time and quality into the content because I didn't want to just do some half-assed something. This was something I wanted to eventually be something long-term. I didn't expect it to kick off quickly. But yeah, it was driven by a big deal to me. And this was something that if this does gain traction, this is something I'm willing to make my lifelong career. And the frustration was, well, looking at the world around me, being very heavily involved in the educational system for so many years, being a teacher in animation and art, although I was blessed, honestly blessed to be in the same room and teach in the same school with, in my opinion, some of the greatest artists I've ever known and some of the most inspiring, passionate teachers I've ever known, I was also very empathetic and sympathetic to the struggles that the educational system, in Canada included, had to deal with. Lack of funding, shitty teachers' salaries, lack of resources, overpacked classrooms, students that were dropping out a lot. And an educational system that was very often fashioned far more by bureaucrats than artists, where these students have already gone through their elementary and high school education, and now they're being held back for language when it's their mother tongue, when they're there to learn art. And to me, this was a real shame. And seeing some of the most brilliant, gifted artists that didn't necessarily fit the, quote, mold, which is very ass backwards for an art community. There shouldn't be a mold for an art community, right? That they would drop out. And these gifted artists, man, I would be so heartbroken to see certain artists drop out when they were just so gifted. I couldn't invest more than 2 to 5 minutes per student in the 2 to 4 hours I had with these big classes, not including the curriculum that I had to teach. I came from there. And when I started Lucid Pixel, I thought, well, for starters, being Canada, the education is incredibly affordable compared to a lot of other places in the world. But imagine the United States, where it's hundreds of thousands of dollars to go to a school. This is something that Ethan mentioned with regards to Janet's education as well, because she had gone to a lot of these high-end schools in the United States. It's corruption. All I can do is call it corruption, that you could charge anybody that amount of money, even for the most prestigious school, is to me, maybe I'm spoiled being a Canadian, but holy shit, that sounds corrupt to me. And that was a real rub for me. But not only that, but it's, when you do cut the funding on certain schools, if you do go one of those high-end schools, you get the better educators because they can get paid better salaries. But for the rest of the schools out there, even though these teachers are very passionate, well, very often if they're very skilled artists, unless they really truly love teaching, which was the teachers I dealt with, well, screw that. I'll just go and get another job somewhere else that pays better because this is barely making ends meet. So it comes at the sacrifice very often of, well, the standards of teachers. And very often, I remember going for a job interview for one particular school system. I won't mention which one, where they offered me a job to teach a certain course. And I said, well, I'm not really qualified. I came applying for this job because this is what I'm qualified for. But this one, I'm not really qualified for. And they said, don't worry about it. And I went, what do you mean don't worry about it? Your students are paying me to teach them. What do you mean don't worry about it? And they said, it's fine, don't worry about it. What are you talking about? Like, basically, they would hire any idiot off the street to teach the course. They just need somebody to fill that spot. And to me, well, that doesn't work, does it? In fact, I think it should be the absolute opposite. You should be getting a very personalized educator. You should have the Rate MD. We should have Rate MDs for art teachers online. In fact, there's a business idea for you. Start a website that rates art teachers. There's a good idea. That way, when you're going out to learn from somebody, you know what their style's like. You can get inside opinions on what that teacher's like, what their communication skills are like. Are you compatible with them? Are you not compatible with them? Do they offer practical? Are they more, romantic, theoretical type of teaching? What are you looking for? Are you looking for somebody to inspire? Are you looking for technical? What phase in your artistic growth are you? And to me, that kind of stuff should be immediate. You should know that before you even start with an educator. So for me, think about it. The way I advertise, in a sense, is through my personality. You listening to me right now, talking. As you hear me communicate, you're getting an idea on my personality. That personality might very well resonate. What's the only good example you have on how that could resonate into a lesson when it's just you and me doing a private art lesson? If you listen to me and you think, oh, this guy just never shuts up. He's too yap. He doesn't get to the point, or maybe he's too to the point. He's too blunt and cold and factual. I need somebody who's a little bit more warm and human. Well, you can decide that by listening to me share my experiences with you. And that's the kind of thing you should have. You don't pay a huge amount of money for a random lottery draw of teachers that may or may not be complete assholes. And there's a lot of assholes out there. Trust me. So always plan with purpose. And when we come back to what Janet had shared, she kind of walked into it saying, well, I've got a lot of skill, which she does. Nobody's arguing that. She's a very passionate artist. Nobody's arguing that at all. And that's why I think that whatever I do is going to succeed. But when you're working in a studio, that's pretty much all you need, because remember, other people are deciding what you do for you. But when you're starting your own business, you use every part of the buffalo, as Brad Bird would say. You don't waste any part of who you are. Everything that you are goes into what you make. So your personality, how well you personalize, how you communicate with other people, and your technical skills, and your business sense, and your presentation skills, those too play into it. But if you just walk in saying, well, I'm good at art, I'm going to succeed at business, those two things aren't necessarily the same, because some people can turn art into business and some people are just really good at working in studios. So in that regard, I would very much say, take your time, plan a lot, make sure that there's a lot of reason for you to produce something. You're not just doing it because you want to do it. It's because you actually have purpose. And that purpose is very often what's going to lead to success, rather than your desire to make money on your own. That very often is a little bit too generic and isn't really grounded on anything substantial. So, as always, I love you with all my heart. Hopefully, I've enlightened you a little bit today, and happy painting. Take care.